I am a coroner and this is by far my worst case. I am a certified coroner who works with a very skilled team of biohazard cleaners and mortuary assistants. My crew is usually called in after the police have ruled the cause of death as natural, accidental or suicide. Anything else is handled by an unaffiliated crew. As you'd expect, I've seen my fair share of gruesome and harrowing things in my line of work. The first thing that comes to mind is a case I took on in early June of last year. An elderly man had slipped in the bathtub and split a nice curve open in his head. He tripped and ironically brained himself on one of the metal handrails he had installed in the bathroom to keep him from slipping. It was a clean split from the frontal bone to the occipital bone. He was frozen in a prone position with blood bubbling up like snot from a fancy new smile opened up on his scalp. The faucet kept filling, and the water kept rising at a snail's pace, overtaking the lime scale rings in the tub one by one. He struggled to pull his head above the water's surface for minutes, if only that fresh new ravine in the back of his head could have sucked air down into his lungs. Maybe then he'd have lived to take another bath. But that story ends exactly how you've imagined it did, with a wrinkled old corpse with skin stained rose black, laying face down in an overflowing tub of blood water. That was the worst case I'd ever seen. Until last week when I took a call from dispatch about an apparent suicide. The police had just finished picking the bones clean on. The report said it was a 24-year-old Caucasian female. She was carrying along just fine in her second trimester when she decided to slit her own throat in the middle of the living room after the father unceremoniously decided to step out of the picture. We arrived in two sleek white vans, one loaded up with cleaning supplies and the other equipped to load corpses in and then them out. The lawn was peppered with strips of police tape and the occasional disposable latex glove. Police are often sloppy at cleanup in my experience. A patrol car across the street that was monitoring the house, waiting for our arrival, gave us a veiled wave and then sped off down the street. The home oozed out ominousness like an unseen gas leak. The front door gave a shrill protest as it eased open. Immediately I felt dread close in around me like a weighted blanket. There she was, laying face up on a lattice blue rug. Her skin was a sickly pallor of muted white interrupted by the sleek black tangled of her hair and the blotches of carmine blood pooled around her neck and dried in the deep curves of her collarbones. Her belly was horribly distended, bubbled out by rising bloat and the cold fetus inside her womb. The expressiveness waning in the milky crescents of her eyes sent a coarse shiver down my spine. But we had a job to do, and so we got to work. As respectfully as we could, we pulled a black body bag around the rigor mortis wooden framework of her body. Me and my assistant Mike then shifted her onto the gurney and wheeled her out to the van. As we pulled up the back of the van, from behind our lead biohazard cleaner Kai came huffing out of the building after us. He was dressed in the usual neon yellow jumpsuit, and I could see the ripe flecks of his Islander muscles beneath the plastic. Sweat glistened balmy and dripping from the bow of his massive forehead. "So, you guys are just gonna leave the body back there or what? Where are you two going?" I looked at Kai with a skeptical bewilderment, and rolling my eyes I unzipped the body bag so Kai could see the gruesome contents within. As soon as I opened the bag, the strong hinted outline of her body dissolved and the bag settled down flat. "What the fuck, Kai? Is this some sort of sick joke?" I asked impatiently. A look of terror glazed across the murky brown turbulence of his eyes, and instantly I knew it was not a joke. A wave of nausea overtook me and I felt an army of invisible ants prickle up across the skin on my back. The two of us ran back into the building with Mike following close behind us in his hooded jumpsuit. We reached the family room, and there she was laying perfectly posed on the floor, in the exact same position we'd found her in. I nearly vomited that morning's breakfast all over the hardwood next to the rug. "Go get the gurney, now." Mike rushed out. Kai stared down the corpse with a wrinkle of unease settled on his brow. I watched him switching his balance from foot to foot with an uneasy, awkward gait. It terrified me to see this tank of a man so offset. A minute later I heard the gurney's wheels thumping determinedly back up the porch steps. We once again loaded her inside the body bag, dragged the gurney over, and heaved her onto it. This time I cinched her body in with the heavy straps dangling off the side of gurney, and I buckled her in. I pulled them so tight I heard the soft tendons and ribs beneath the woman's ribs twist and then crack. We wheeled her out towards the van once more. I nodded towards Kai and motioned for him to carefully watch the pool of blood on the rug. We had gotten only as far out as the sidewalk when Kai started screaming. I quickly unzipped the top corner of the bag, and the second I had done so it deflated like balloon. We relayed back inside to find Kai mumbling in Tongan. The man must have weighed 300-odd pounds, and yet, there he was, sitting with his ass to floor, his face racked with affliction. His thick sausage fingers were clutched around a handful of his shirt fabric. He'd peeled his body out of the top half of the jumpsuit which bundled around his hips. He was soaked with sweat. I could hear the convulsive manner of his breathing, and the panic in his eyes reminded me of the time I accidentally swallowed a marble as a child. I rushed over to Kay, sidestepping the corpse which was back in her usual position in the middle of the floor. Something caught my eye at a passing glance. Was that a grin I saw on her face? Kai's skin was quickly blotching with purple spots beneath the crooks of his eyes, which looked swollen near to bursting right out of his skull. Mike rushed in, and we took the wide-set man under our arms and dragged him out of the house. It took all the effort we could muster, but we wrangled him out onto the front lawn. "Call a fucking ambulance, Mike." Mike rushed away to retrieve his cell phone, and I watched two little rivulets of blood trace down from the soft corners of Kai's tear ducts. All at once, he convulsed, croaked, and then he fell still. I caught up with Mike and pulled him towards the lawn by the sleeve of his jumper. I was planning on just loading Kai up into the van to drive him myself to the emergency room. But when I turned around, Kai was gone. I took a few hesitant steps towards the door but was stopped dead in my tracks. The woman's body was laid in the exact same manner it was in before, with one obvious exception. Her mouth was now curled into a sinister grin wide enough to show her rows of faded tombstone teeth. My eyes diverted to her side and I saw it then. Propped against the wall just a few feet from her was Kai, rigid, dead and still weeping blood from his eyes.